This is not your father's Seiko. This is Grand Seiko, a brand worth considering for a luxury watch. Stay tuned as I review the Grand Seiko collection and see if it's something I want. Welcome to Adventures with Time. I'm your host, Bob. As I enter my third year of collecting watches, I'm looking to get my first mid-tier luxury watch. What do I mean by mid-tier luxury? Watch the first video I posted on this subject, where I explain this search and where I consider the Omega brand. I'll put a link up here for your reference. In this video, I'm going to look at what Grand Seiko has to offer. Now, I've had Seiko watches for most of my life, as most people have. Before I started collecting watches, I wore these Seiko watches as my mainstay. One of the first acquisitions as a collector was the Seiko Alpinist, the SARB 017, now discontinued, but expected to be resurrected shortly. I also bought the Seiko Samurai, as something of a vacation watch, suitable for the beach. I have videos on both of these watches, which you can find up here in the cards. But I must say, I've always considered the Seiko brand with some disrespect. Seiko was the affordable watch brand that everyone got, nothing special. Then I started collecting watches and realized that Seiko has a huge following and lots of cool different models, but still not what I would have considered a luxury watch. Then I discovered that there was Grand Seiko. However, I still naively lumped Grand Seiko in with the affordable Seiko brand. And worse, I thought anyone who looked at a Grand Seiko watch, should I get one, would also think they were nothing special. But I don't want to be one of those watch people who need validation from others on my watch. It shouldn't concern me if someone doesn't appreciate a watch I'm wearing. Only I need to value and respect the watch. I'll admit that's still a mindset I'm working on. So Grand Seiko should and is on my list for consideration for my first mid-tier luxury watch. As before with Omega, before I go out and look at the watches in person, I need to become familiar with the Grand Seiko collection, and I'll do that from their website now. So here we are on the Grand Seiko website. And as I find with most watch websites, there are various ways to look at their collection. Obviously, you can see up here a link to go to their collections, but let's scroll down and notice that Seiko has three major collections, something they call Elegance, Heritage, and Sport. And of course, only the Sport is self-evident as to what's in there. You get to see what's new. But then we get into the Grand Seiko movements. And the Grand Seiko watches come with three different types of movements. There is the 9S mechanical, which is like a traditional mechanical watch, although engineered to high precision. There is their 9F quartz watch, which, as I've read on various articles and seen on other YouTube channels, this quartz movement is a step above, at least one step above, your run-of-the-mill quartz watches. Seiko spends a lot of time in growing and selecting the quartz crystal for these movements and tunes them to optimal performance. And finally, there is the spring drive. The 9R spring drive is a mixture between quartz and mechanical. And what I mean by this is there is a quartz crystal in the watch to create the basic timing. However, it's not powered by a little battery. It's powered by a power plant powered off a mainspring and various other components that create the electrical impulse required to drive the quartz. Along with the quartz, there's other circuitry and rotors and wheels that help to regulate the watch to its ultimate performance. Now let's go back and look at the three collections and determine what watches I want to look at when I see them in person. So first is the Elegance Collection. One thing we can see right away with the Elegance Collection is that most or many of these watches are well over $10,000 in retail price. However, there are a few that fall within the mid-tier luxury price levels that I have set. And in fact, one I'm interested in looking at is this GMT, the SBGM 221. It's driven by the 9S66 automatic movement. It's just under 40 millimeters wide, and that's pretty much suited to my wrist size. But let's look at the watch in detail. This watch has a nice cream-colored dial to it, with what seems to be common Grand Seiko multifaceted applied hour indices. A nice printed minute track on the outside. For hands, we got a very thin second hand, these beveled hour and minute hand, and then the GMT hand with the arrow pointing to this inner 24-hour track. A nice framed date window. Other than that, though, the watch is fairly plain with just a polished outer bezel, but something I want to see on the wrist. Now let's go take a look at the Sports Collection. Now, as the collection name implies, most of these watches are going to be either GMT, racing, or dive watches. And we can see again that many of them are over $10,000 in price. But there is one or two that sparks my interest. One of them is this SBGN 003, another GMT watch. Let's take a look at the specs. This is a 39 millimeter watch, so a little smaller than the GMT watch we just looked at. This, however, is powered by their 9F86 quartz movement. Let's take a closer look at the actual face of the watch. Some people say this is reminiscent or homage or a ripoff, if you will, to the Rolex Explorer with this satin finish outer 24-hour bezel. But that doesn't bother me. I like the looks of this watch. Very black dial, again with those multifaceted applied markers, a nice framed date window, again razor sharp beveled hour and minute hands, a very thin second hand, and this nice orange arrowhead GMT hand, which is meant to point to this outer track on the bezel. Now, this bezel does not rotate, it's fixed, so you're able to keep time in just a second time zone. But that's okay for me. I think this watch is a nice combination of a dress watch and something that looks a little sporty. So, somewhat of an everyday watch. So, I think this is a watch that I want to look at in person. Now let's look at the Heritage Collection. And you can see that these watches, in general, are a bit lower in price than the other two collections. And there are a lot of options here. Of course, one of them is this newly released SBGH 269, a limited edition watch that has that beautiful red wood looking dial. Very similar to the other dials that I've been looking at, in that it's got these multifaceted applied hour indices, the beveled hands, the framed date window. But this red dial face is really something I want to see in person. It's an automatic with a very high beat movement, 36,000 beats per hour. Let's take a quick look at the specifications. It is almost a 40 millimeter, 39 and a half, a nice thickness of 13. It's got their 9S65 automatic movement, and it has a respectable 10 bar of water resistance. Again, not that this is a watch that I would wear in the water. Now, I was in Japan on business about 30 years ago, but was able to take some side trips to do some touring. And I must say that this red dial brings back a lot of memories of my trip to Japan. Whether it's this plank look of the dial, reminiscent of the floors in the very old historical buildings, or this very red-looking dial, again, reminds me of some of the lacquer woodwork I've seen there. All in all, I find this to be an attractive watch, something I'd like to try on in person. Now, I'm not sure I'll be able to do that since it's limited to 900 pieces. I don't know if any of the ADs will have this, or even if one of the boutiques, but it's something I'd like to look at. The other thing I want to take a quick look at is their Heritage Collection, the Seasons watches. They've created 4 watches, at least so far 4 watches, one for each of the seasons. I'd like to see if there's any one of them that suits my interest. Here is the watch honoring spring, and you can see it's got this etched looking white or silverish face, and it's a spring dive movement with a power reserve indicator on the front. We also have the summer watch, which seems to have this green dial with gold indices and hours and trim. I don't know how much I like the marrying of the gold attributes of the dial and the stainless steel case. Then we get into autumn, which is a high beat automatic movement with a blue face, quite elegant looking. And finally, we have winter. Looks like an off-white textured dial. Spring drive, again, with that power indicator sub-dial. There they are, all 4 of them. I'm not sure if any of them really suits my liking, but again, if possible, I'd like to try one on. Now that I've had a good look through the website and know what Grand Seiko has to offer, I think there are 3 specific watches I want to try on. First is that SBGM 221 GMT. This is an automatic watch that retails for $4,600. Next is that SBGN 003. That's the quartz GMT watch with that stationary 24-hour bezel. It retails for $3,200. And finally, that limited edition red watch, the SBGH 269. It's an automatic watch that retails for $6,400. I don't think I'll be getting that one, but it would be nice to see it and try it on in person. I'd also like to try on some or all of those 4 seasonal watches. Although I don't think any of them are for me, it would be nice to try them on in person. And now it's off to my local Grand Seiko authorized dealer. I went to one of the very few local Grand Seiko authorized dealers in my area. And of the Grand Seiko watches I was looking for, he only had one in stock. In fact, as you can see, He had very few Grand Seiko watches in his shop. I was able to try on the sports model I was looking for, the SBGN003, a GMT with a fixed bezel, powered by the 9F quartz movements. And although I would prefer this watch with an automatic movement, I must say at $3,200, this watch fits nicely into what I consider a mid-tier luxury watch. I was also able to try on something I wasn't prepared to look at, the SBGJ203, a GMT watch from Grand Seiko's Heritage line. This uses the 9S high beat automatic movement and comes in at a retail price of $6,300. But I must say, even at only 14 millimeters thick, I found this watch a bit thick for what I would like in a mid-tier luxury watch. So I decided that to see the watches in which I was interested, I'd have to go to the Grand Seiko boutique in New York City. Well, I came into New York to the Grand Seiko boutique. I did see a lot of good watches in Grand Seiko. So let's take a look at that. I came into the Grand Seiko boutique looking for three watches in particular. The SBGM 221 GMT. Unfortunately, they were out of stock on this watch. The SBGH 269, that red limited edition watch. Any of the Four Seasons collection. And I also wanted to take a look again at the SBGN 003 Quartz GMT that I had seen at the AD, just to compare it side by side with any other watch. Well, let's start out with what I feel is the star of the show. That SBGH 269 with the red dial reminiscent of autumn leaves. This is a 39.5 millimeter watch with a thickness of 13 millimeters. It's powered by the 9S high beat automatic movement, which oscillates at 36,000 beats per hour. It's a stainless steel case with sapphire crystal and 10 bar depth rating. It comes with a beautiful stainless steel bracelet with a nice small clasp on the back with doubled buttons, a signed screw-down crown, and a screw-down display case back where you can see the skeletonized rotor with the Grand Seiko emblem. All in all, a very beautiful package. But the real beauty of this watch is that deep red dial, which looks even more impressive in person, more than my pictures can do justice. On my wrist, this watch gives off impressions of elegance, beauty, quality, and stature, all in a sort of unassuming fashion. And the Grand Seiko logo under the 12 provides the presence of luxury, even to those who don't know about the Grand Seiko line. In my opinion, this is a great mid-tier luxury watch. For me, the other serious contender from Grand Seiko is the SBGN 003 Quartz GMT. I could now compare it side to side with the other Grand Seiko watches. Since the boutique had their watches unwrapped, I could get a better view of this watch than I could at the AD. I must say that it does show well on the wrist. Certainly something for me to consider. I took the opportunity to get a close look at some of the four Grand Seiko season watches. They had three of the four. The SBGH 271, the summer watch, and the SGBH 273, the autumn watch. Both come with the 9S high beat movement. And the SBGA 415 winter watch, and the SBGA 413 spring watch. This one they didn't have. Both come with the 9R spring drive movement. Each of the four watches are priced at $6,300 retail. Although very nice watches, to me, it's the SBGH 269 which has the greatest appeal to me. But this presents me with a difficult dilemma. If I wait too long to make my decision, all supplies of the 900-piece limited edition will be gone. Yet making a decision to spend $6,400 plus another $500 more in taxes is hard to do. Well, I must say that Grand Seiko does have a nice lineup of watches, and I'm going to keep a couple of them in consideration for my first mid-tier luxury watch. But I still have a few more brands to visit. So stay tuned for upcoming videos where I look at TAG, Breitling, Rolex, and a few other brands. Thanks for watching.